Well, welcome to episode 2 of the I5 podcast. It's been quite a hectic December for the government, going back to November. This is the Christmas special, How They Make Jelly Beans. Quite a few have been made. As ever, I am John, and I am with my co-host Jim.
Hello.
Hey. And, yeah, there's been, well, let's be frank, it's been scandal after scandal after scandal. It hasn't stopped. It started right back at COP26. And quite frankly, there have been things that have been shot up into space and crash landed back on Earth that look better than Johnson's credibility right now. What have you made of it?
Yeah, I mean, what you just said pretty much describes it accurately. It's been a clown show, like a circus, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to cover it up, which makes the whole situation even more hilarious.
Yep. And finally, the media, it seems to have been that one step too far, and the media really have turned on him. So, for the audience, while the corruption's been going on for the last 2 years, what's really triggered this domino effect that's led to pressures to resign? Initially, it was Johnson's Peppa Pig comments, him acting like the clown. That led to try and cover up some of the more harsher things he does, to get that talked about in the media. That's been pretty much the Tory strategies ever since Johnson got in. Release stories on the Saturday to control the Sunday headlines. You know, Hancock resigning on the Saturday. We won't be going into this in great detail on the podcast today. This is just the backstory. The only reason why I bring it up is the clown act seems to have stopped working at the Peppa Pig comments. It more or less led to specious questions of whether he has the mental capacity to do the job. Now, obviously he has. Again, it's just an act to distract, but it got to the point where it was absurd. Where this has really taken hold with the clown act having stopped working was the Owen Paterson scandal. Just to describe it for the audience, Owen Paterson is an MP who had been investigated by The Guardian for quite a while. He had taken over £100,000 a year from 2 companies. The Guardian reports his total is £500,000 from the 2 companies overall. He arranged meetings with government officials for representatives of that company. And he also approached other government officials on the behalf of that company to further their interests. He also took on a second job, which you're not supposed to do, as a consultant for Lynn's Country Food in 2016. Now, the focus wasn't so much on what Paterson did, it was more what Johnson tried to do and how he tried to handle it. He had the Tory whips, basically disciplinarians in the party. He forced them to put through the Leadsom Amendment, which was to replace and rebuild the Standards Committee with his own people who, well, wouldn't hold him accountable, basically, under the pretense of it needs an appeal. This backfired massively and got a very negative public response when they had to do a U-turn on it. Jacob Rees-Mogg having to do that speech in Parliament, which was just embarrassing. And the backlash of the public lasted for quite a while. It was talked about for quite a while. And it was to be quite frank, the corruption in blatant view of the public as they tried to vote it through bloody Parliament on camera. You couldn't make this up.
Yeah, and it's like corruption is definitely a reality, but I think as the years progress, politicians see that they can get away with it. They're just starting to more and more disregard the public's opinion because they feel like they can control it, and they actually can, as looking back at the various events that took place.
I think, as well, with you saying that, you're right, because it wasn't until mid-November that he actually finally admitted it was a mistake to back Paterson and to try and get that through. And that pretty much was the beginning of, well, I think he lost the trust of the public a long time ago, but this was more or less the media turning on him.
Yeah, well,
And
they didn't have a choice really, because this was like, this event was like a turning point, and the
oh
media
yeah,
had no other choice but to actually deal with it.
I actually think as well, just to get to the meat of it, because in this episode, where Jim and I are going to be looking at not only how the Tories have done this, sorry, that's a bit ridiculous statement there, not only how the Tories have been acting during this, but how the actual media's responded and how the opposition, Labour's responded. But we'll get to those sections just to keep it structured for now, staying with the Patterson debacle. Um, the actual media reaction, while they sensationalized it and rightfully so, and really hammered it home, for the first 24 hours, they were dead silent on it. Laura Kuenssberg, the BBC political editor, had a rather embarrassing tweet that hasn't aged well. Featured the statement, "This is a proper Westminster village story." Yep. And in the actual tweet, she was implying that it was a nothing story. Shouldn't be paid attention to. It's just a minor thing, trying to basically pack a standards committee with your own people. And that just, that shows either how out of touch correspondents like her are. I mean, this is the chief BBC political editor, or it shows they could be corrupt, or a combination of both.
Or they just, try to sort of drill how people should think, the sense what people should consider big political news and what people should consider, small political news. And also, like, this sort of silence would be a gracing period granted by the media to the government, because I'm pretty sure the government can sort of slap the media's wrist and say, right, you're not going to publish this, ignore that, or whatever. But they can only do it so much, because at the end of the day, the public media, news outlets, whatever, are private companies.
Oh yeah. I mean, that could have been what's going on, but doing a bit of digging, it could also be as well that what's called the Westminster lobby, the political journalists, I'm sure this has been said before, certainly Novara Media have went into great detail about this, and to be honest, I kind of agree with them on some of the points. It is quite disturbing how close the journalists are to the actual government on this. So, for example, Laura Kuenssberg, the BBC political editor, who will be standing down soon to become a presenter on the BBC. The rumours are she's actually after the head of communications job in the government. And a lot of correspondents either come from the government as Westminster researchers, which may give them an understanding of government infrastructure, I understand that. They come from those kinds of backgrounds, or they go on to become advisors to actual politicians as well during their elections. Certainly there was a Sky News political editor who did that for Theresa May. That was the election where she barely won, barely held onto her seat against Jeremy Corbyn, so smashing job there. It could be as well that there's a conflict of interest with the actual correspondents and the government. They're too close to them, they form connections with them. Certainly during the interviews you get the impression some of them are friends with them. And to be honest, whenever there's lobbying, correspondents tend to make a lot of money from it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like politics on news, basically. Everyone has an agenda, and most journalists want to climb higher, to earn more money, to have more power in their hands, and it all revolves around that. So, of course, there's a lot of stuff in the background, like deals and whatever, which we'll never find out, but it doesn't surprise me, but it is atrocious. But this is basically the reality we live into.
It's sad, really. One thing I thought was particularly stupid. Colin Brazier from JB News. To the actual lobbying and taking of money, his solution was that MPs should be paid more. I believe it was 20,000 more because he was arguing they're not paid as much as the rest of the world's MPs, the rest of Europe. I think that's flawed for two reasons. One, the issue here was transparency, and that was the issue of the conversation, and how because it's so black box, it's very hard to actually find the wrongdoings. And also, most people who become MPs, they do so to do this specifically. Paying them more wouldn't really dissuade them. They want the networks, they want the connections, and they want these grotesque amounts of money because of this, just in my opinion.
I mean, okay, there's a lot of things going wrong on this picture. First of all, at least in private businesses that are decent, you only get a pay rise if you go above and beyond doing your job. Now, for the life of me, I cannot think of any example that any single person of this government has gone above and beyond doing his job. At least the results don't show it, unless you can argue that if no one went above and beyond, the situation would be a lot worse, which says a lot about the rest of the politicians that just barely do their jobs. Furthermore, when you have a declining economy and you have a lot of people that struggle with poverty, and you even argue that you have to cut down free meals in schools for the good of the budget, of the country's budget, you cannot go out and say and argue that politicians need a pay rise. And also, did you say that he compared the money politicians make to the money politicians make in Europe? Because Brexit happened. We're not in Europe because we wanted to be our own things. So how the hell are you comparing your situation to something that you don't want to be part of?
Oh yeah, and I haven't researched it, but I'm pretty sure I've researched obviously the stuff for this podcast. I always research, but in terms of what happens in European parliaments, places like Germany, France, I couldn't name any off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure this goes on as well. You know, with the money they're on. You know, I'm pretty sure they don't get up in the morning and think, gee, I'm paid enough, I'm not going to take these opportunities.
Well, the reality is that no one is happy with what he earns. Like, people always want to earn more, and especially now that prices are going up, and it's not just about greed. I'm talking about the average person here, that the average person barely manages, really. That's the reality. And it's a bit pretentious to be in a leader position, having a very strong income compared to the rest. And you could argue that your job demands to have such an income, but you're not doing your job. Like, if politicians were doing the jobs properly, we wouldn't be in the situation we are now, nor we had the scandals that are happening constantly, nor we will be hosting this discussion here.
Yep. I actually, I was thinking on what you said before as well about politicians acting exceptionally. I think the closest there has been, and I know what I'm about to say, because I'm about to make a massive contradiction here. Matt Hancock was not a good politician by any sense of the word, or in any sense of the word, rather. He was extremely corrupt. He was an embarrassment. I've never seen a bigger sniveling little weasel in my life. His right hand saw more of his assistant's arse than the office furniture at number 10. As the health secretary, the NHS had a very high vaccination rollout that was seen as one of the major accomplishments of the pandemic, but that he might have done some organisation, but he'll have had people beneath him doing the work, and it was the people on the ground that administered those vaccinations, and it was the population, going to actually get them, if that makes sense. And And it just seems to me like even the people who had those accomplishments, it was an organizational accomplishment, not one down to an individual politician, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, it does make sense because in this scenario we're talking about a construct, right? Like a team.
Yep.
If
Mm.
if the team does well, the credits go to the team, not the team leader solely. Like the fact
Mm-hmm.
the team leader decided to do something and the team actually did it doesn't mean that the team leader went above and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue that they 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 did go above and beyond in the case that they actually proposed solutions, good solutions, that would have good results. In which case they didn't, because sure, the vaccination rate was high and we
Mm-hmm.
got the vaccines quickly out and people got vaccinated and everything, but we're in
Mm-hmm.
2021 and we're still talking about quarantine measures and
Yep.
lockdowns.
I mean, the quarantine measures in the UK, we're also going to cover that one in the podcast because arguably, debatably, very heavily, probably, to be honest, most likely, they were a smokescreen for a different scandal that we'll be getting into as to why this is a Christmas special. But I was just going to say as well, I've actually got two things, but just to get this one out of the way, do you remember Dominic Cummings?
Yeah, I do.
Yep. For the benefit of the audience, Dominic Cummings is a former advisor to Boris Johnson, who had his own little boo-boo in terms of breaching regulations, where, one of his family had COVID symptoms, and he decided to go halfway across the country, even went to visit a castle. Long story short, when there was a bit of a power struggle between him and his best friend, he and his best friend, and Kerry Johnson, Boris Johnson's wife, the Prime Minister's wife, his best friend was forced to leave. Cummings walked out as well, or was asked to resign. And ever since then, Cummings has been absolutely determined to bring down the Johnson government specifically. So, unfortunately, while this does say a lot of what I would certainly think a lot of anti-Johnson individuals would like to believe, this has to be taken with a pinch of salt because this guy has got a bias, and he always emphasizes this bias. He is saying that this whole thing was a preemptive strike on the Standards Commission to get rid of people like Catherine Stone, who's also linked to the Election Commission, and this was a preemptive strike to cover up not so much Paterson, but his own breachings of the conduct code. Things like his wallpaper, some donations that were a bit shady to say the least, very questionable, getting free villas, free holidays. Again, this goes back to, what lobbying is. Lobbying is just attempting to, legally and lawfully attempting to influence the actions, policies of a government through things like emails and letters. It basically starts breaching the rules when money's involved, MPs start taking secondary jobs. And again, this is why the transparency of it, is a good solution. And it's hard to believe David Cameron coined that one, David Cameron himself, who benefited a lot from illegal lobbying. And like I said, Dominic Cummings thinks it was to cover up, it was a preemptive strike, so the Standards Commission couldn't investigate Johnson's own misconduct and breaches.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable assumption. And to be honest, I can't see a scenario where politicians would need to get a secondary job or get involved in secondary jobs, considering that, hold on, you can't even do your main job properly, you want to get involved in other jobs. It's like, one problem at a time. I mean, sure, it gives them more opportunities to make money, but and influence, which is the main reason why this is allowed and no one is talking about it. But yeah.
The other thing I was just going to say as well is back to when we were talking about the media, the actual papers, newspapers that had the reaction to this back in November. The Telegraph, the day after, acted as if it didn't exist. Wasn't even front page. The Guardian, other papers like that, they had it on the front page. Again, the Guardian, very left-wing leaning paper. So of course they covered it. Daily Mirror, but Yeah, the Telegraph just acted as if it wasn't there. Completely ignored it. Very, very Tory-leaning newspaper. In
Yeah,
fact,
not surprised for that either.
Johnson actually used to be a journalist for the Telegraph.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a hack journalist for them.
Well, that says a lot.
Yeah, again, a connection to government that maybe the correspondents shouldn't have. I mean, it is a conflict of interest because if this sounds harsh, but just as a debating point, or an audience debating exercise, should correspondents be allowed to go back into jobs in the government once they've been a correspondent just because of the one factor that they could network and do favours like softballing questions well, not just to Tories, to Labour as well. It's just the Tories have been in for that long in the UK. They could basically establish connections and agree to softball questions to politicians in exchange for favours in future jobs. Or if a correspondent gets too scared to say anything, basically not have any. Sorry.
Go on.
Oh, or if a correspondent thinks they can't criticise too much because they might lose any future career potential in the government, that's actually wrong.
Well, depends on the side you're supporting. If you're on the government side, it's absolutely fine.
Oh yeah,
it's good even. But if you want like transparency, then it's probably a bad idea. I mean, I can tell you, in Greece, this is like standardized. Every single interview that involves a prime minister, basically what they do is the news outlet, they send the questions to the parliament, and the Greek parliament has to approve them before they're being asked. Then they review them, they pass them to the prime minister so he can prepare. So basically every single interview is prepared. There's no like hard questions or anything like that. So all the interesting questions that should be asked are never asked because of that reason.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if that's what goes on here. I won't name any correspondents, but I've certainly seen a few on Sky and BBC, basically softball, ask very soft questions to the politicians, and basically let them off with things or don't press on details that they should press on. I think that the reason why they're really hammering in on Johnson now, and Jim and I will get to what they're really honing in on that has somewhat exposed them, is they're frightened they get dragged down with Johnson. But to be honest, there are always consequences to this type of thing, as you were saying. And if you look at the audiences that BBC and Sky have, even GB, the audiences aren't that big. And it's not just because news channels are a dated medium. It's the same with newspapers. In fact, the Murdoch Empire has actually said that some of the newspapers that they have, and actual Sky, and the actual news channel Sky, it's basically just hemorrhaging money. The population doesn't really listen to them.
The thing that I would like to mention to this point is like that these sort of medias have an expiration date, because newer and newer generations, in terms of like getting informed about what's happening, about the news, are moving away from the Stratton medias. So they're leaning towards internet and independent sources. So eventually, these medias really will expire and won't be as powerful as they are now.
I mean, add to that as well, the population just doesn't watch it. You know, they don't look to these people. They don't look to get information from these people anymore. Well, some do, obviously, but the majority don't listen to them. I mean, sometimes they listen to different sources on the internet, but the correspondents no longer have that role of articulating how we criticize the government, articulating how we think of our opposition to them.
Well, yeah,
they're supposed to do that.
Today's news are pretty much synonym to propaganda.
Yeah.
So.
Or yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So why would you waste time to gather news from sources that have an agenda?
Yep.
Makes no sense.
Yep. And quite a lot of the time as well, the political correspondents, I've noticed some of the ones at Sky definitely do. For example, the medical correspondent at Sky actually said that before the, mind you, no one's a fortune reader, but he actually said before COVID hit the UK, he actually said, "Oh, I don't think COVID will take on in the UK." Boy, he was wrong.
Yeah, that comment aged well.
Yep. There was another one as well. Again, I'm not mentioning names because we don't want to cause too much trouble. We are a small channel, very small. There was another one who said about COP26 that COP26 will make Britain the centre of the world in terms of, protecting the environment, green technology, all of that. Now, it's not just the Tories that have tried to do this. Labour tried to do this as well, get Britain ahead in terms of green technology, expand into that market. But this correspondent was talking as if, Britain will be the centre of the world because of that. And, how did it end? It ended with Boris Johnson saying, "We are not corrupt, we're not corrupt, we're not corrupt." And most of the world leaders there actually went there to distract from their own domestic issues. Biden, who was incredibly unpopular at the time, the Australian government, who were incredibly unpopular. So that one didn't age well either. And just on the note we were saying about how no one really listens to the Westminster lobby that much. Sure, we keep up with the scandals, we listen to them, but we don't really take their opinions on board. We form our own. Yeah, they've gotten most of the political calls wrong. And again, it's a little bit of them being so out of touch with the real world because they're locked in this Westminster bubble,
It's not just that. It's mainly incompetence, really. That's how you can sum up the whole plan of action, if you can call it a plan, really, with every single event that took place in the since forever, really.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, when you mention the word government, the first word that comes to mind is not competence.
No, you're right, absolutely.
So that says a lot, and it's always been an issue. From my perspective,
and on that as well. Oh yeah, and there's definitely some validity to that. And in respect to the actual when it comes to the actual correspondence, I hate to say this, but specific political editors, political correspondents, whenever you think government, you think them, but you don't think of them as people who criticize or analyze. You think of them as extensions and mouthpieces.
That's
at least quite a few people. Yeah, effectively, I agree. They are. They really are. They're just effectively mouthpieces for the government, and the trade-off is they want the connections. And as we've seen, with Johnson, most of them do want to go on to become either presenters in channels or on channels rather, or they want to become quite powerful in the government. They want government roles, like for example, Koonsberg wanting to be head of government communications, or becoming advisors to prime ministers, things like that, because it has happened before. But alas, you're right about what you said. It's just the way it is. But that doesn't mean we can't call it out and laugh at it.
Totally. And it's just one of the reasons why we see this global crisis, really, because people get in position of power for the wrong reasons, and this will only escalate.
Yep, and we'll always have the corrupt media to well, we can't say the corrupt media as a whole because we don't know definitively that it is. We just
depends on what you include in your definition. I mean, not all media are corrupt, but at least the mainstream ones are.
Yeah, definitely. Opinion. Yep, I mean, the BBC is always going to have that bias because they get their funding directly from the government and they're only allowed to have the license fee because, the government allows them to have it, so they'll always end up being at the government's mercy, and that's regardless of who's in either Tory or Labour. Sky and the Murdoch Empire in general, GB News is the Murdoch Empire. A lot of people, well, I'm not going to say a lot, there's quite a few people who don't realise that. They take on private partners, and as a result, each one of them has a different product or a different perspective that they market. So, for example, GB News right now is very culture war. They've got their programs which are designed to go viral on the internet, SJWs, anti-SJWs, that kind of thing. And they have their shows designed to be big on the actual TV for the normies, if that's an appropriate word to use. people who aren't really on the internet. And I find that usually what they put in there is they talk about the culture war as well, but they smuggle in Cameronite politics. Sometimes it's fair, sometimes it's not. I actually heard Alex Phillips telling people not to go to university. She was right in some aspects, saying they are quite an ideological ground. There's a lot of political movements in the unis. You can't stay out of them, mind, and just study. That is an option. And there has been incidents of, people. I mean, this is a topic for another thing. There have been incidents, but it's the fact that she also included with that. Should you really go to university? Because the taxpayer just ends up paying student loans.
Yeah, it's like the whole idea of the necessity of university in someone's education is something that should be discussed in a separate episode. But really, with how the society is moving, the actual value of universities towards someone's education is debatable, depending on the area, on the studies. But yeah, it's like I said, it's a whole another can of worms, which we should tackle in another episode.
I was just presenting it as a product that GB News actually, offer. Like, they have their own political biases, if that makes sense. The same as like Sky and the BBC. So they, it's just whether I'm not saying like debate it now. I'm just saying that's kind of what they argue. The way the BBC would argue, and defend university. Sky would definitely defend it. All of these news channels, they've got their product, they've got their service, they have their sponsors, and that affects what they produce and what they tell you and what they omit. Which is quite sad, and it's why that 24 hours of silence over the Owen Paterson thing was so telling, before they started ripping into him.
Yeah, it was more like the calm before it was like the calm before the storm.
Yep. Now here's the really interesting one. This is the seasoned one. The many parties of Christmas that the government had. Not this year, though. Last year. Whilst, now, for the audience, this one is quite serious. It's also quite fucking inbred with the way that it went down. And it really has exposed, not just the government, but the press as well. Basically, the UK overall was in lockdown last year. At Christmas, there was quite surreal regulations. There were the tiers, but the one thing that we weren't supposed to do was have parties. We weren't supposed to meet up with people. There was very mixed messaging from the government. For example, at one point the guidelines contradicted the rules, but we weren't supposed to have parties. That was the problem. And the government had, well, quite a few. The first one that came out.
You say the government had quite a few, but what if they were funeral parties? Because I'm pretty sure funeral parties were actually allowed.
Were they? Were they?
I think so. Like the only exception would be if it was like a funeral or something, then gatherings were allowed. So maybe it was a funeral party, and everyone just lost their minds over nothing.
Well,
have you thought of that?
Except I have, but there's one. They should have tried that, but there was one thing that nuked that excuse. Because, to be honest, if that's actually true, I wouldn't put it past the Tories or Johnson to try that. Do you remember how? We were talking about it just now. I meant to use this as a connector into the next section. Journalists having those connections to the government and getting roles because of those connections. Jim, I know you've seen this clip. Allegra Stratton. Allegra Stratton was a BBC journalist, and to be quite honest, she was renowned for causing a bit of trouble. She pretty much said she was renowned for saying some very questionable things. She said in the context of people who are unemployed and things like that, if people can't afford children, then they shouldn't have any, and then went off onto a rant on a rant. She did also an interview with someone who was on benefits, and it was quite biased. At one point during the interview, she was trying to put words in the person's mouth, so her journalism didn't really have that much integrity. But she was connected to Johnson and people in his cabinet. Now, she was made the press secretary because at one point, I don't know if you know, at one point Johnson was trying to copy Donald Trump, so he got like, you know how Donald Trump had that special room where he had Kayleigh McEnany, or was it McKerney? Oh, I've heard different pronunciations of that name. Again, we're not going into Trump on this podcast, it's just a comparison. Do you know how Trump had that room where he would deliver press speeches, and the Kayleigh McEnany, the blonde, would answer questions from the press in that specific room?
Yeah, I have heard of it.
Well, Johnson wanted to copy that and have a version of it in number 10 Downing Street, but it got scrapped. And that role that McKerney had was, or is it McEnany? I'll have to double check. That was the press. Her role was to be the press secretary. So Stratton was to come on as that role, the press secretary. Once that got scrapped, she became the spokeswoman, the Prime Minister's spokeswoman of COP26. Now, the reason why I bring on that tangent, there was leaked footage of this woman delivering a fake press conference. I don't know if it was an exercise or just a bunch of bored staffers just taking the piss. And during it, well, we'll post a link to the video in the description, so you can see the clip for yourself. She basically got asked some questions about a party and said things along the lines of, oh, this party that didn't happen wasn't socially distanced, and there was cheese and wine and things like that, and she was laughing, and at one point she makes reference to it being recorded. Now, the reason why this one hasn't gone down well with the public is people at Christmas, based on government advice, didn't travel. Their loved ones died without them going to visit them. You know, there's quite a few incidents like that. People obviously couldn't have parties, people couldn't spend time with their families. Out of the COVID crisis, we've got a mental health crisis from it, people being isolated, keeping themselves isolated because they were told to. The suicide rate got quite high during this event. You know, the sad thing is at Christmas, sometimes some people don't have the strength to not pull the trigger. And, you know, it was very serious. People followed the rules and it was very detrimental to their health. And the negative reaction from the public is, well, it's the government officials holding the public in utter contempt, to be quite frank, laughing and giggling as they broke the rules. Now, Johnson is still denying that a party took place, but people have come out and confirmed it happened. Dominic Cummings, one of them. Again, he's quite biased, but others have come forward as well.
And also, I would like to comment on the bullshit comment I heard from one of the clips where a spokesman said that the government will not comment on leaks. Basically, you got us red-handed, but we'll not comment on that because it's not an official source. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was bullshit. It's like, yes, so whenever there's a leak that could be evidence or, you know, raises questions, we're just not going to dignify it with an answer.
Because it's an official source.
That's convenient.
Yeah, of course it's an official source. You're not going to publish your own debt.
Yep. It's just, like I said, it's just a coward's way out with the questioning. And, you know, that they've still, Johnson's still, I don't think I'll have to double check this because, to be honest, there's been a lot going on in the past couple of weeks. Just let's get the parties out of the way as well. So that was party 1. Party 2 was the Zoom quiz that Johnson had last year as well. Now, while it was on Zoom, he had 2 people in the room with him. So there's another breach. And then party 3, Simon Cases, the top civil servant, who Johnson was going to get to investigate whether there was a party at number 10. He had a party at his office. Now, while he didn't attend, he knew it was there. He walked past it to get into his own office. It was kind of in the same building. So he's had to step down from the role of investigation because he himself had a Christmas party. Just as well, Stratton did resign because of this. So she was thrown under the bus, which we will get into. And the last one, party number 4, was Sean Bailey, a mayoral candidate. Last year, 14th of December, he actually resigned after a damning tweet about people making sacrifices.
Yeah, I saw that one. So, it was the icing of the cake. This shit show.
It really was. It's obviously in the culture. I mean, we all know that. The thing about Stratton what's really revealing about Stratton is not only is she that link between journalism and the politicians themselves, having both roles, it shows they think they're above the law.
It's not just that, it's more of like following the
They don't follow the rules or the guidelines.
Following the logic that, right, do as I say, not as I do. It's basically that. And basically what you said, that they're above the law. Because clearly they impose measurements, guidelines, whatever, but they themselves, rather than setting the example and being the first to follow, it's actually the opposite. They're the last people that would follow it.
Yep. And because of what people went through last year to find out we did this, you know what I was saying before at the Peppa Pig comment, kind of the end of playing the clown to distract.
Yeah.
The laughter's worn thin. The clown act Johnson had, you know, walking with a hunch, trying to look like a clown, you know, ruffling his hair to look like a fool. It's not working anymore.
Well, yeah,
you know, people...
but at the same time, all this has happened in a period of 2 years, well, give or take. We still haven't seen any real consequences.
No.
And I don't think we will ever will be.
No, I don't. I personally, if Johnson does resign, it'll only be when the Tories trigger some kind of party mechanism to get him out. I don't think he's going to resign of his own volition.
And even if he does, he won't be out of the parliament. He won't be out of politics.
No. I mean, he'll make money off books, everything. Like, he'll go on the lecture scene. He has said before that he back when they were calling for his resignation over care homes and things like that about a year ago, he actually said that he wasn't even being paid enough because he couldn't support all of his children because he's got quite a few. You know, so he has made references to it. Yeah, he's got tons of them.
Well,
he's had 2 with his current wife, Carrie Johnson. There's been 2 since he's been in since he started his premiership.
Maybe he plans to make his role as a prime minister something that can be inherited. Basically, you know, just making future politicians, so he will always has influence in the parliament.
He's probably making his own political party at this stage.
I mean, yeah. Why not? Imagine having a football team of numbers, but they're all in the parliament, and you have power in them.
I was watching.
It's so horrible to even think about it, but
I know. But yeah, like I said, the Christmas party fiasco, it's not gone away, but the press have been tearing into them, and rightfully so. Now, we mentioned the restrictions and the use of distractions. Johnson went into Plan B. Now, as he was talking about doing this, his own MPs actually challenged him and called him out, saying, you're just doing this to distract from, you know, the Christmas parties. You're just doing this to distract from your resignation calls. You know, and Johnson's adamant he's not. I disagree. I think he is doing it to distract from that. Plan B didn't really change what people were already doing. Just face masks in stores and a few other things. People were already doing that anyway. You know, and when he had that press conference, the journalists at the same time were basically accusing him of it. You know, they were saying you're just distracting from it. So, yeah, even the distractions don't seem to be working. But on that note as well, unless you want to comment on that one.
No.
I was just going to use that as a connection to go into, again, because we did say we'd look at the journalists' response to this, the media's response, because the media's response is just as interesting. Even though the press were tearing into him for breaching the rules, it was him specifically. And one thing they didn't ask from all these parties, and this is really telling, at no point so far, aside from Nigel Farage on GB News, at no point has anyone asked for a guest list.
Yeah, which is very, very weird.
Yeah. Now, there's a suspicion why. It was leaked from a source that, and I'm sure you won't be surprised at this, Jim. It was leaked by a source that journalists actually attended party at number 11 rather. It was Boris's first party was at number 11 in his flat. I was just saying number 10 because that's what we call, that's another word for the government, that's another phrase for the government in the UK, number 10. So the party at the flat, it was actually suggested and leaked. I mean, Dominic Cummings also weighed in on this as well, but again, you've got to take what he says with a pinch of salt, that journalists were actually in attendance. And the fact that they're not asking for who attended or asking for a guest list, it would certainly imply that they're, it is a bit suspicious they're not asking for that, maybe because some of them could be incriminated.
Most likely. I mean, that would cause a bigger uproar if they actually proved that both journalists that's supposed to criticize the government were actually part of this.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think they have, and I have my own ideas and suspicions.
Oh yeah, totally.
About, I have my own ideas and suspicions about who it was. Sorry, about who attended that party and who's been breaking the rules. Unfortunately, Jim and I do have some integrity. We do admit our opinions. We do admit our biases. I have zero proof of any of it, so I won't say any names who I think. I won't say the names of any correspondents I think were there, but I have got my suspicions about who they are, who attended that party. One thing though that I can say, again, this is something that's quite funny. At the press conference, Beth Rigby, the Sky News political editor, when she was criticising Johnson for breaking the rules, she was right to do it. There was one problem. I think it was last year, because I've got 6 months in my head, but that was the suspension. I don't know if you remember, Jim, but some Sky News journalists got suspended from Sky for breaching lockdown regulations as well. It was Kay Burley celebrating her 60th birthday, and they opened up a nightclub after the curfew when it was closed to have a party that they shouldn't have had. And then I think they did it twice in one night, and they got caught because they posted pictures of it. And Kay Burley, Beth Rigby, and the medical correspondent all got suspended for 6 months. And what was even worse is, when on their Twitters, all the journalists were saying to Kay Burley, "Oh, I don't think you did anything wrong. The only crime about you is that you look so good at the age of 60. I mean, that's debatable as well. But, that's the mentality you're dealing with.
Jesus Christ. Like, the fact that these people actually govern a country is beyond me. It's just like, not only they decide to break regulation, but they do it in a stupid way. Like, why the fuck would you take pictures when you know what you're doing is wrong? And then be surprised when they actually get leaked. You post a picture of you doing something wrong in the social media, and then you're like, oh no, this got leaked? How? Yeah, I wonder how would this ever happen when you post a picture in this. It's just, stupidity.
I know. It's just the fact that you have the picture of Burley and Rigby like hugging each other, like cheek to cheek. Like there's no social distancing there, and there's no face masks.
I mean, this shows
you've got
how much they know about how things work and how the world works, like how social media works. They have no idea, basically.
The internet never forgets.
Exactly.
I was just going to say as well, just with Beth Rigby, after revealing that, with Beth Rigby having a go at Johnson for breaking the rules, it's kind of like the kettle calling a pot. Now, I can't remember if Beth Rigby has asked Johnson to resign, but if she has, she's in no position to do so. Because if he should resign for breaking the rules, then so should she.
Totally. It's about responsibility and accountability, which are two words that don't exist in the vocabulary that the parliament uses, really.
Yep. Well, it's journalists and politicians. Just to not differentiate them here, the political class, if that makes sense. The Westminster journalists who will get exclusive access to the government, who have the passes to get in. The political class, the correspondents and the politicians themselves. Like I said, they live in this bubble. And they're so sanctimonious. Like they think they. Well, I'll keep that to myself. But they are incredibly It wouldn't surprise me if these people genuinely think. I mean, this is what Ashta Kaur said as well, and I think I agree with her. It really wouldn't surprise me that they think, if it turned out they thought they were warriors who hold the government to account, and they're completely oblivious to how corrupt they are, some of them. And they're completely ignorant of why people cannot stand them.
I mean, they're not oblivious. They know. They just don't care.
Yeah.
It is what it is. As long as as their pockets are full, they won't hesitate to compromise anything and anyone.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, because you and I have integrity. There are some that I am very suspicious of in terms of filling their pockets and in knowing exactly what's going on. There are some net worths which I think are very questionable, to have like that kind of value. But again, there's no real proof or basis for that, so I can't say it. But I think they're, I think some of them know exactly. I think some of them might believe that they're basically noble, but I think others know exactly how scummy they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, this whole party thing has really backfired on them. Not the media. I've not really heard many members of the public talking about why they're not asking for a guest list. So looks like they've gotten off on that one. But yeah, it's insane. I mean, what else he did to try and distract from this? I don't know if you remember. Do you remember when he started saying, now I hate this phrase, we have to have a conversation about, we need to have a conversation about, just have the conversation. But Johnson basically said in Parliament, we have to have a conversation about mandatory vaccinations. Now, again, that's a whole can of worms Jim and I will deal with maybe sometime on a future podcast. But I'm only bringing this up because we are not anti-vax, we are very pro-vaccination. I'm only bringing this up because Johnson was using this conversation to distract from the parties. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I mean, it's what politicians always do, really. Even you can see that in interviews where when you're approaching and you're about to touch like the core of the issue, rather than addressing that, they just deflect or redirect.
Yep. And they'd much rather go onto TV stations and talk about that than these parties, which really show them up. I mean, some of the defences have been idiotic over these parties. Do you know there was one guy who went on GB? Was it GB News? I might be wrong. I don't know if it was GB News or not. I have the memory it was, but I may be wrong. It was a politician who went on one of the news channels and they were talking to him, and he basically said the only reason why people were having a go at Johnson for these parties is because they were bitter about Brexit.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, not the fact that, I think it was Sky actually. I think it was Sky News. Not the fact that people are, not the fact that people couldn't spend their last moments with their relatives. Not the fact that people, again went through mental health issues, being in isolation. Not any of that. It's about Brexit.
Even if it was, that's not the point. The point is that the regulations were broken by the people who voted the regulations in the first place, and they need to be held accountable.
And they're pissed off. Yep, other people made sacrifices.
It doesn't matter why the people are angry. It matters that the people who voted the regulations actually broke them.
Oh no, but I think it does matter. I'm just explaining why they really hate him this time. That's all I'm saying. They followed the rules and made those sacrifices, and they're really pissed off that he didn't, and he's nonchalant about it.
Yeah, it's nah.
Yeah, that the Brexit excuse is retarded. It's just sending out your B team, throwing anything to the wall that sticks, and seeing what does in fact stick.
Yeah, they're basically trying to play whack-a-mole with excuses, trying to hit the correct one that will actually distract and will cause this whole thing to be digged.
I mean, with Sean Bailey's, did you see the actual picture he had of his party with someone splayed out like a cat on the floor?
I have seen that one. Yeah, the post.
That was so bad.
Yeah.
And there's calls for Simon Cases to resign. I know he stepped down as the lead investigator. As of now, he hasn't resigned. However, there's been a few resignations in the last 24 hours. For all we know, he's resigned in the last hour.
Quite possibly.
Just to say as well, going back to the media, like I said, they've really turned on him, but they're being very careful with how they criticise him. And as well, like, just because we're on the ground, people are really asking questions about the press now. Like, certain correspondents have just went off the map during this. Now, we have to use common sense here. This is not a confirmation of guilt. It's December. People could be on their Christmas holidays. So just because you're not on a channel, that does not mean that you're guilty of being at these parties. But the distrust in the media is leading people to come to those kinds of conclusions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, from as long as I can remember, people were always distrust against the media. And I think over a couple of years, it only got worse.
Yep.
Rightfully so, if I may add.
I mean, ultimately, I think as well, the reason why, and this goes on to the next section as well, because I think this is just as fascinating. You know, let's be honest. Johnson's had no opposition, really. He's got an 80-seat majority. I mean, obviously there is opposition, but it's very questionable whether they're effective opposition. You know, we go on to Labour's response to this. Now, interestingly enough, Labour, as of this day, haven't actually asked for Johnson's resignation. Starmer hasn't done that. Just a bit of background. We've seen the Tories go through many scandals the past 2 years. Jim, I'm sure you've seen a fair few as well. You know, you can probably name a few as well. There's been the care homes. There's been Matt Hancock himself and his many, many blunders. You know, giving like 30 million to his friend who owned a bar, giving him a PPE contract. We had Dominic Cummings doing that run across the country. There's been a few scandals. The free school meals was another one. There's been the reaction to Brexit. And despite all of that, Labour have managed to get close and the gap's narrowed, but it's only since specifically this with Johnson going back to Paterson. That's why I chose Paterson to be the starting point of this. Labour's went 9 points ahead. Now, I've got some reasons as to why I think they're not asking for his resignation. That might be good discussion points, but I was just wondering, what do you think of that, Jim?
It's like shifting power. When people get angry towards one side, they will turn to the other. It's been like that since forever, really. Yeah. And this is also problematic in general, because when one side does stupid shit that have a serious effect on the society, then you go on the other side. Yep. The other side does stupid shit. You shouldn't go back to the first side, because by that point, you haven't proved that one side is better than the other. You have proven that both sides are shit. Yep. So it's a bad thing, because if you will end up in an ever-ending cycle of bad decisions, and eventually, no matter whose side is on power, you end up paying the price every single time.
Oh yeah, I actually had some discussion points as well. So for example, I was thinking just in my mind, there might be a little bit of element to this. For the first time, Labour are 9 points ahead. We've seen scandals with Johnson, but all the Tories. And it seems to be turning on Johnson, not the Conservative Party itself, that's caused it. It might not be in Labour's best interest for Johnson to leave number 10. Solely because Boris Johnson's very easy to hate right now. There are still people who love him. He's kind of like Marmite, but there's a lot of people who despise him. He's very easy to hate. He looks like a cross between a Neanderthal and a Skeksis for a start, with his, the Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. Yeah. People despise him for these Christmas parties, the Owen Paterson scandal. It's really highlighted him. And if they were to get rid of Johnson and bring in someone like, say, Liz Truss or Rashid Sunak, it would bring in a leader whose flaws the public aren't as familiar with. They may not know how to digest them, and Labour might lose the lead because there's a new leader and the population might give them a chance. I'm not saying that would happen. I'm just saying it might be in the back of Labour's mind. Johnson's a very easy target to rally against.
Johnson is an easy target anyways, because there's been a lot of controversy around him. But the problem is that this hasn't stopped. It's just gotten worse and worse. And
Yeah.
it's safe to assume that it will get worse still,
Yeah.
because apart from the corona parties, this whole shit show called coronavirus is not over yet.
Oh,
And
definitely
it
not.
will be interesting to see how is he going to go about it, because they're still on about regulations that need to be voted, they're being debated, etc., etc. So
Well,
this is not over yet.
yep. And speaking of when we were talking about mixed messages earlier, on that, the regulations when Plan B was voted in, 100 of Johnson's MPs voted against him. And it was Labour that, well, 101, and it was Labour that voted them through.
Yeah.
That certainly wasn't good.
No, it wasn't.
Well, actually, saying that as well, in terms of being very select, do you remember when Dominic Raab was on holiday for Afghanistan, and the media really laced into him? Again, this is like a discussion for another one, but just as a contrasting example, they started lacing into him, demanding for his resignation. Yet, when Sunak goes on holiday for the during the height of the Omicron crisis, and whatever you want to make of it, we are we are potentially facing lockdowns. He goes on holiday. I think he's back now. He kind of gets let off with it, and I'm just wondering if the media are preparing to start pushing for him to be the next leader of the Conservative Party.
I am not sure, but the thing is, they will try to avoid using someone that has as much controversy as Boris, and I think it's going to be difficult to find one. But also, don't forget, this goes back to the discussion earlier about having agendas and personal gain between the media and the different correspondents and the parliament. So I really cannot see who the media is going to
Oh no,
support.
I don't either. Like I said, to be honest, there are a few names people are throwing around, but it's purely it's purely anyone's guess right now. Sunak has been mentioned a few. Sunak has been mentioned a few times. Sunak rather has been mentioned a few times. Liz Truss's name has been thrown in there. Dominic Raab's has, although I really can't see that one. Michael Gove has been thrown in there, but as well, Labour has had a few problems in the past. Obviously, they've had the Corbynite group in there. Starmer's had problems with. Starmer himself really hasn't connected with the public. He's had a few public meetings that didn't go very well. They've been like the Tories as well, they've got their own factions and divisions internal to the party. The recent situation isn't just smoke screening. Is Johnson trying to smokescreen himself of his smokescreen his own scandals and the focus on the press? This is also smokescreening a lot of problems Labour have had. So that might be another reason why they would like Johnson in. But I just think they're interesting discussion points, because a lot of people are saying, and I think I agree to this to some extent, it's a lot easier to be in opposition than it is to be in power.
Well, yeah, because in opposition, your main goal is to say no.
Yep. And in opposition, you still get your paychecks.
Indeed. And
it's beautiful.
It's actually quite funny, because sometimes when a party that was in power gets to be in the opposition, that party tends to criticize the same mistakes that it did and propose solutions that sometimes are actually decent. But it makes you wonder, if you're able to think that as an opposition, while you had the power, why didn't you think of it, and why didn't you implement it? Because as soon as a party that is in power then gets in a position, somehow everyone forgets all the mistakes that party did, and they have no sort of shame in the sense, because they just keep criticizing, ignoring that sometimes what they criticize was a result of their own mistakes when they were in the power, which frustrates me quite a lot. But it is what it is.
It is. I mean, Johnson hasn't kept many of his promises. I mean, aside from Brexit, he's not kept many of his promises that he made in the election itself. There's actually, I really need to look up this historian. I heard it on someone else's podcast. I think it might have been Rose of Dawn's. There's a historian who's actually done some work on the Tories, and apparently they've never kept a single election promise throughout their entire history, with the exception of maybe Brexit with Johnson. I mean, that it doesn't surprise me, to be honest. I think there's probably a lot of political parties like that. But one thing as well, when we think of consequences on the Tories, now going back to Patterson, now the reason why I say this is a very recent one. We mentioned things have been happening quite a lot. I think with Johnson, the hanging rope might be coming for him. The Tories are quite ruthless when it comes to getting rid of their leaders, especially when they think that their own seats might be threatened. Now, with remember Owen Patterson having to resign over his lobbying, his seat came up as in a by-election, North Shropshire, which has been a safe Tory seat for 200 years. The Liberal Democrats, can't speak today. The Liberal Democrats won it. That was a big blow to the Tories, and Johnson's response to it was, when he was getting questioned quite heavily by a Sky News deputy political editor. I was quite surprised, actually. Normally that dude doesn't have that in him. His effective defense was, well, I think the reason why I'm unpopular, I'm paraphrasing here, the reason why I'm unpopular is because the media's not giving me favourable coverage. Basically copying what Joe Biden did, where he had a secret meeting with the press, begging them to give him favourable coverage. I mean, that just says it all, doesn't it? He's literally saying, it was literally this. Well, I hold myself accountable. Obviously, I'm leader, but other stuff went wrong, and I'm blaming other people now as well.
Because it's easier. It's easier.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it's having very real effects. One thing that's happened as well with Lord Frost, who was the Brexit minister, Brexit being Britain's exit from the EU, to anyone outside the UK who doesn't know that. Lord Frost was basically doing some, to be honest, quite negotiations to do with complicated subjects, such as triggering Article 16, the Northern Irish Protocol. Very complicated subjects which could be a podcast on their own. Again, that's for another podcast. We're mainly talking about the scandals. Now, where this comes into relevance is Lord Frost has said he's resigned because of the way the party's going, and he's also implied because of the scandals. I just want to say, because that's a relevant event to this, I'm not so sure. I think Frost has seen Johnson as a sinking ship, and he's seen the Brexit project as a sinking ship. It's almost a religion now, Brexit, with the way the Tories talk about it. We must have faith that it will work. You know, it's like the unemployed. We must have faith in the private sector that even though we're taking away this £20 uplift, we must have faith in the private sector that they'll look after the poor. Always delegate to someone else and have faith they'll do it. But yeah, I don't think Lord Frost has resigned because of these scandals. I personally think he's resigned because of the complexities of what he was having to deal with in terms of the negotiations with the EU. And he's seen he's seen some of the effects of Brexit, and I think he just wanted out.
Yeah, and
my
that
thought.
Doesn't inspire confidence as to whether Brexit will actually work, because my understanding is that they already half regretting the decision to do Brexit.
Some of them definitely are.
Yeah, at least a lot of the people are.
And
And
farmers.
Yeah, as well, farmers.
And
definitely
farmers
some of
have
the
really
people in the
turned on it.
parliament. Sorry, what was the comment about farmers?
Oh, farmers have definitely turned on it.
Yeah. Because you cannot really understand and appreciate the consequences of a choice you make up until you actually, start seeing them affecting you.
Yeah.
Because in paper, everything is just a theory, it's something that it's not necessarily real. In this case, it wasn't real at all. Because the consequences they predicted, or rather the consequences they said, were vastly different than the ones that we're experiencing. And we still haven't experienced every single consequence came from Brexit, because it's an ongoing procedure, plus we have COVID in the way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And like I said, that's a very complex subject, and the only reason why we bring it up is because the event of Frost resigning is a big thing, but I don't think it's. I was just saying I don't think it's to do with the scandals. Based on what you've said as well, Jim, I think it's absolutely to do with the EU, and he just wanted off. I was also thinking as well. This is a very random injection. I was supposed to bring it up earlier. It's just a minor point, but I thought it was really funny. In relation to the UK, there's obviously the Scottish Conservative Party as well. Now, while they're their own party, they're still, the Conservative Party, who are aligned with the British Conservative Party. They have their own Conservative leader over there. And there was a news channel interviewing a Conservative Scottish MP, and the journalist basically said to the guy, will you give me some positive attributes that Boris Johnson has? And the guy couldn't do it. He couldn't bring himself to do it because obviously the majority of the population in Scotland hate the Tories anyway.
Yeah.
So they're in this horrible position, this rock and a hard place where they can't just disown him completely. They have to be in alignment with him because they're the Scottish Conservatives, but at the same time they don't want to be for him either.
Yep. It's quite a situation to be in. Hilarious situation.
Yep. Do you think if Johnson stays in, they will win the next election?
No, especially with how he handled COVID and the recent scandals. That has caused a major hit on the trust of the people against Johnson in general and the party. So it will be highly unlikely that they're going to win the next election anyways, regardless of who they're going to have as a party leader.
Yep. I think you're right. I think it's very questionable that like I said, it's a couple of years away, the next election. That's an eternity, but I can only see it getting worse at this point with more and more that comes out. Look at what it's taken for Labour to finally stand a chance to even get ahead in the polls.
Yeah, it all depends on how this party will do in the time that it has left.
Yeah.
Because if they somehow miraculously manage to do something good, maybe that will up their chances, but I doubt that will be the case.
Yeah. I don't think they'll keep the red wall. I agree with you. I don't think if it keeps up, they'll not win the next election, but I think they'll lose the red wall. Because one thing that was said, just as a minor thing, because we were talking about distractions, before we move on to the last few topics, when I say last few, it's like the last two. A lot of people have been saying that this whole thing with the Christmas scandals, the lobbying, was to distract from some other issues. It was brought up at Question Time, actually, where I think I sent you the video. I don't know if you saw it, where someone on Question Time said, we're losing our rights to free speech through COVID acts, which are being introduced as normal legislation. We're losing the right to protest. There was even a situation where in the north, after Storm Armin, some places in the north went without food and water. Went without water and electricity for 12 straight days, and that didn't really get much coverage from the press.
I didn't see that specific video, but I did see what happened with the storm.
Yeah.
It was quite tragic.
Mm-hmm. And the sad thing is, because we have been talking about press coverage in relation to it, and this is kind of relevant because it's what I feel at least has been distracted from. What we're saying about the news channels having different products, GB News didn't even cover it really. They covered more aspects of the culture war, things like that. Sky News focused more on the personalities of the government, rather than how the policies actually affect the population. We're not really seeing press coverage of what's happening on the ground to people, and I think Storm Armin really highlighted that. God knows I lost 12 tiles off my damn roof.
Yeah. And the
it was
reason for
bad.
that is because again, there's an agenda behind it. If they were to cover
Yeah.
it, that would be another reason to show how incompetent the government is.
Yep. Um, I don't think they'll keep the red wall in the next election. Just going through my notes here, see if there's anything else. So the final section we had as well, unless there's anything you want to say on the topic so far, Jim, as well.
No, not really.
Okay. A while ago, Angela Rayner did something, just for the audience, Angela Rayner did something quite, well, I thought it was very funny. I don't know if she meant for it to be as tactical as it was, but during the free school meals, when the government was voting against them, and they'd made a travesty of the home meals for children who were genuinely starving in the UK during the lockdowns. Children starved to death in the lockdowns because they were dependent on free school meals because it fed them. But that's, a lot of countries have that level of poverty in them. The UK is no different. She called an MP who was talking scum, and he was very taken aback by it. And the Speaker had a real go at Angela Rayner for it. Now, here's the thing. A lot of the population do think the Tories are scum. And I think the Tories were very uncomfortable when it was made public, when that was exposed on TV. And what was even better was you had interviews where Tory politicians would come on and they would say it's wrong to call us scum, it's wrong to call us scum. And it's certainly wrong of an opposition leader to use that kind of language. It doesn't look good. But they didn't deny they were scum. They just didn't want the term being used.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah, it's actually like, it's having an asshole in the group. You call him an asshole.
Yep.
Oh, you can't call him an asshole, but he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you can't call it.
Yep.
You can call him an asshole. It's not politically appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But
now,
as long as you don't call things as to what they are, there's no way you can face the truth and actually take steps in changing it to what to rectifying the whatever is wrong.
Mm-hmm. Now, Rayner did it again at the Labour conference. She repeated that word because, let's be honest, it got a reaction. It went viral, so to say, in the media. It got a bit of attention, so she used it again. Now, John Craig, when he was covering that and described the use of the word scum, he looked quite scared when she said it. Now, I'm not going to go into why. I'm not inside the man's head. But he looked very concerned. I've got my own opinions as to why that might have been. But in terms of are the Tories scum, I mean, we've had, for the last 9 years, I think it's about 9 years, since going back to David Cameron with the Coalition, we've had cuts to the NHS. We've got now food banks integrated into welfare, and they've become the norm. Tory politicians like Jacob Rees-Mogg have said that they're uplifting. We should be, to be honest, we should be ashamed that we have food banks in the UK, that we need them. We shouldn't be ashamed we're feeding people who need them. We should be ashamed that we have them. We shouldn't have them. We shouldn't have people on that level of poverty. We've had the GCSE and the A-level debacle with Gavin Williamson, who did resign initially. We've had years of cuts to social services, which has resulted in major recent failings. I'm sure you've seen them in the news, Jim. Baby Star, Arthur, the kids that have died. There was there was the failed free school meal schemes during the lockdown. They decided to vote. People like Matt Hancock voted against free school meals. They cancelled them in the summer when the kids weren't in school to save the money, but then didn't reinitiate them for kids during the time during the additional time period, which would have meant they lost nothing. We've got 200, as of 2019, we had 280,000 people homeless on the street. You and I actually were, I'll not say where we were, but we saw the level of homelessness where we are, and we saw, violence between them as well.
Yep.
Are the Tories scum? What do you think?
Well, if you're in a crisis that affects the whole society, like COVID, your economy is going to shit.
Oh, this was before some of this was before COVID.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring the most recent example. And from the one hand, you decide to vote that for the sake of your country's economy, you need to stop the free meals in school. And on the other hand, you also want to pass a vote about increasing the politicians' income, arguing that you need a little bit of a motivation to make politicians more motivated to deal with the increasing in difficulty issues. Well, doesn't that make you a bit of a scum?
It really does. I mean, that's a really good point. You've got these spoiled people who never really grow up, who go to the elite universities, they network, they never work a day in their lives. Not all of them, but most of them. And then during the lockdown, they were expected to work 9 till 5s, and God forbid they put in extra time because they're only the government. And they couldn't cope under that kind of pressure, and we all suffered for it.
I mean, don't get me wrong, you still do need skills to network and go ahead, because the way their world works demands certain standards for you to be able to climb the stairs of power. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you're capable of leading a country.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because
I mean, look at Matt Hancock.
They have for people to arrive in a position of power are not the same as the standards that position of power demands for a person to be effective at what he does.
Oh yeah. I mean, look at Matt Hancock. I mean, aside from the fact he was Boris Johnson's friend, what skills did he actually have to be health secretary? And then, pardon? Nah, he didn't have any. None whatsoever. And then, after that, he apparently... this is what happened. He said he had a job with the UN to be an environmental advisor to Africa, or to South Africa or something like that. And then it fell through. But the fact he was approached for that job again, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, networking is a great thing if you're good at it, and you build a network of people with skills, and you have a catalogue of people with appropriate skills for the appropriate jobs. And that's great. It's just when it's abused, that becomes the problem. You know, like an old boys network?
Yeah, which is the case here. And I think it's been for a very, very long time.
And, you know, because that idea was presented by another YouTuber, Maximilien Robespierre. I will correct that name in the description if I've got that wrong. But I was just going to say as well, you know, where was the press covering it as they did all of this? Not just the recent COVID stuff, but across the years. And what have they heard rumours about that hasn't come to light yet? You know, what are they accessories to? Because they knew the rumours. I mean, yeah, you're right, there are acts which forbid them from talking. But, you know, what if they've made money from it and things like that? And if the politicians are scum, you know, what about the press? Certain members of the press.
I mean, it's all interconnected, isn't it? It's like it's like a domino, or not domino. Sorry, it's like a chain. Like you may be further down, but you're still part of the same, you know, chain. So if A equals B, then B equals C.
Yeah.
That kind of situation. If the politicians are scum and the press is working closely with the politician, that by definition makes the press scum, because the press supports what the government is doing.
Yep. I mean, again, I won't mention a name because while I have seen this, I've noticed Sky didn't exactly leave the video up to be recorded. There's legitimately a Sky News correspondent who cannot keep a straight face. They are always smiling. I thought it might be a facial tic, but the eyes light up as well, almost schizophrenically, like they're opening a Christmas present. And this person, I'm not even going to say the gender, this person literally had a smile on their face while they read out that 73,000 people were dead from coronavirus. Admittedly, I think it might just have been the excitement of being on television and getting to announce it. But I mean, come on, you've got to be able to keep a somber face when you give out a death statistic.
Unless you have a black humor. But even if you do, since you are in the position that you are, you need to suck it up and be serious about it.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, with all the I think if this corruption with Johnson and the scandals was to have a numerical value, it would be as high as Adam Bolton's blood pressure when he's losing an argument to a woman. I mean, what a December it's been for the Tories. Did you see this coming?
I think no one could have seen this coming, honestly.
Yeah.
But stupidity apparently is infinite. There's no limit to it. And it's
some members of the...
both a shame and a scary thing to see that this level of stupidity exists in people who govern this country. Because we're talking about the people who are responsible about the country's future. They vote laws that will dictate how we live. And they have that level of intelligence and integrity, which is, well, non-existent. So that really makes the future look grim.
Yeah. Do you know when I was watching PMQs for research, and you see them shouting at each other, do you know what it kind of reminds me of? Do you know the Dark Crystal? How I made a Dark Crystal reference? Do you know how in the Dark Crystal you have the Skeksis devouring everything and shouting at each other and laughing maniacally? I imagine like that as the Tory side of the chamber. And on the Labour side, do you know the good ones who basically do fuck all until right at the end? And they let the Skeksis destroy everything. They remind me of those ones. And we're kind of like the podlings and the gelflings who pretty much get wiped out every day, get taken away. The Skeksis just run rampant, destroying everything, taking all the resources, while the good ones just sit and do fuck all. I mean, I know the idea is that they're preparing the last male gelfling to go off and, destroy the Skeksis and whatnot. There's kind of a destiny thing there. It's been a long time since I've seen this film, but it does kind of remind me of that. And the economy is kind of like the Dark Crystal, where this race found the Dark Crystal and upon discovering it, decided to fuck with it, even though they knew it affected reality, and it destroyed them and separated them into the Skeksis and the good ones, and it basically ruined the world for everybody else. The Tories and the Labour Party, for me, are two sides of the same toxic coin. They're all part of the same political culture. They're just on different opposition. They might be in opposition to each other, but they're still part of that political class. And the economy is just what gets destroyed amidst this, and people suffer under it. It's not a well thought out analogy, I know, but it just struck me. That's just how it struck me. Yeah.
It's very
looking
accurate.
forward to it.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the new year. Also, to be honest, well, Jim and I didn't want to just end on misery, because we did try to be funny with this one, but obviously when you're dealing with things like homelessness and mental health issues and things like that, sometimes you've got to be serious. End with something positive. There's really not much positive about politics at the minute. We actually were going to do a little game review as well. Basically, we each played a game over December. I actually played Ghost Warrior Contracts, finished it and platinumed it. Jim, didn't you play Star Citizen and still playing it?
Yeah, I'm still playing Star Citizen. It's, despite with all the controversy, it's quite rough around the edges. But when it works, it's beautiful. and
Oh.
the state that it's in. I mean, you do need a friend to play with because it's quite tedious to play alone.
Yep.
But it, I can say at least for the ship flying, that works 90% of the time. It's very well polished. The rest of it needs a lot of time, but considering what they're trying to do and they're doing it all in parallel, it sort of makes sense as to why it takes so much time and money.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I would like to say
footage.
is that it has, well, possibly one of the best ship designs, if not the best ship designs that I've ever seen in any video game, ever.
Oh yeah.
Not just visually, but in terms of how, like, the sound as well, and the feeling of driving different sizes of ship.
Yeah, I saw the video that you sent us. The ships were stunning, to be honest. I thought it was an amazing game.
Yeah, it has a very big level of immersion, but it still is a long way of being stable. At the moment, there are problems with performance and stability. But I hope that in the coming years this will get better, because the foundation is solid and it's there. It's just that it needs polishing. But the devs do try. They have weekly updates, or every 2 weeks, I can't remember. And they do try to communicate their progress towards all these different features they're working on, which is something I appreciate. And it's something that you don't usually get from AAA publishers. But yeah, it's something that, despite all the bugs and the fact that it's rough around the edges, it's a game that I enjoy playing a lot more than some of the AAA titles, say for example Cyberpunk.
Yeah. God, I know. God, what a train wreck that was when it first came out. I just think it's funny.
Yeah.
Like, we've had Star Citizen now, we've had Cyberpunk, we've had Final Fantasy VII Remake. Do you ever think we'll get Beyond Good and Evil 2?
At some point, maybe, but I can't say for sure. It's weird because nowadays studios try to play it safe, and apparently the playing it safe card seems to be the remakes.
Yeah.
I mean, over the last 2 years, how many remakes did we have? It's like, fuck it, we run out of good ideas, people like these games, let's bring them over. It's like the foundation is there, all we have to do is just, change the textures and push. Sorry, that's the remaster. The actual remakes is a total remake. Sometimes you need to add something new. Sometimes you get the addition of a remake. Like you get the remake in the title, but basically they do is just swapping the textures around. But even then, sometimes the ending result is shit. For example, Warcraft. Frozen Throne. I was so expecting for that game because I loved Warcraft 3 and Warcraft the Frozen Throne, Reign of Chaos and Frozen Throne. And then the remaster came out, and I'm like, right, I'm just going to wait just to see the reviews in case they haven't fucked it up, and they fucked up so much. I was disappointed. It reached the point where they said, right, the game is shit, we're not going to spend any more time dealing with this.
It just gave up.
Yeah, and they straight up stopped working on it. Although Blizzard right now has its hands full with other issues, wink, wink. But
lawsuits.
Yeah, exactly. But at the moment, it seems like remakes and remasters seem to be a trend. For better or worse, I would say for worse, because development, if something works, you don't touch it to make it better, because you will break something, and arguably that has happened.
Even
13,
Rockstar, for example.
Sorry?
13 on PlayStation 4. It was originally a PS2 game. They remastered it. I don't know if it was a complete remake or a remaster, but that game was a train wreck. It crashes, it glitches, you fall through the floor. Oh, the trophies don't
Yeah,
even sync up.
yeah. It's like it's a shit show, but I
Yeah.
think the quality of games seems to be dropping in general. You do get
Yeah.
the gems in between. For example, Hades
Mm.
was absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Uh, but in general,
Sekiro.
yeah, as well, Sekiro. Um, it's like you get the technology keeps progressing, so you get
Mm.
better and better graphics, more beautiful, more detailed. But the actual quality of the product gets worse. I mean, Cyberpunk, for
Oh
example,
yeah.
had
Oh.
beautiful graphics when they weren't glitching.
Yep.
Uh, but gameplay wise, the fuck was that? And there's been a lot of titles like that, not as bad, but
Mm.
sometimes as bad or even worse. And it's starting to becoming it started becoming a norm that
Mm.
the product that you pay full price, it's expected to be bad on the first weeks up until the patches roll out, which
Mm.
is it's just wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, look at trends as well because well, I do remember when a few years ago Activision and EA were trying to convince everybody that single player games weren't popular,
Uh,
and then out of nowhere God of War comes out, and the guy behind God of War had to fight to make Kratos the main character in that. And it turns out to be the best game on the play. Well, I like it. I don't think it's quite the best game. It's one of them. I don't know what my best game on the PlayStation 4 would be, but it's definitely up there. And that made a hell of an impact on the PlayStation 4. It's considered
yeah,
by many to be the best game on it.
I would say it's definitely one of the no, it's possibly it's definitely the best game I've
Mm-hmm.
played in terms of narrative and characters.
Yep.
It's the first time I actually didn't press the skip dialogue button to
Mm.
skip a dialogue on an NPC,
Yep.
which
Oh.
was very weird once I realized it.
Mm.
You have
Yeah.
like 5 or 6 characters in the whole game, including the NPCs, but
Mm-hmm.
they are so well written. It's
Yep.
just awesome.
It plays the mystery value. Sorry, it plays the mystery mechanic so well because I found myself wondering how the hell did Kratos get in Obviously, I've played the game and things, so I know the story. But I was thinking, how the hell did Kratos get in Norse mythology? Why does he have a son? Who was his wife? You know, you find yourself asking these questions, and the game gives you these details as it goes on, like a reverse engineering of it. You
Yeah,
learn the background of why he's there, and that was real. That was genius.
yeah, it really was the way they made it. I mean, gameplay wise, it's not something that will blow your mind.
Mm,
It's fun, but it's not mind blowing, at least in my opinion.
mm,
But the whole narrative, the mythos, the lore, the way they implemented it, it's
mm.
just very much on point, and
Yep.
uh, it has me eager for the next one. Also,
Oh yeah.
surprisingly, Spider-Man as well was apparently one of the good
Yeah.
ones, which I haven't played
Spider-Man
myself,
was amazing.
but from what I've seen, it
Recommend it.
looks gorgeous and
Oh,
plays
it's
gorgeous as
brilliant.
well. So yeah, it's like the thing is the reason why people EA and Activision would say that is because online games have a
Mm,
better opportunity for revenue,
yeah.
tons of it, and the reason why is because online games usually are competitive,
Yep.
and
Very much so.
that gives them the opportunity to allow players that are willing to spend more to become more powerful in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pay to win.
Exactly, in one
Mm-hmm.
way or another. I mean, Ubisoft tried to do it on a single player title. In
Mm-hmm.
Assassin's Creed, they've tried to do it on every single Assassin's Creed game after what was it? After the third one, sorry, after Black Flag, I think.
Yeah, I think that was the
The last one that didn't have microtransactions, and then they just started adding stuff that you could buy, like weapons, and especially on the very last three, it got worse, where you could buy XP boosts and stuff like that, which I laughed so hard when I saw it.
Yeah.
And they did it on purpose, that when you level up, I'm talking about Odyssey here, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which was in ancient Greece. Every time you leveled up, you have to level your gear up, every single piece individually, to match your level if you want to have the maximum stats for your level. And the grind for that was atrocious. And thank God someone made a trainer that allowed you to bypass that by having the amount of materials needed for free on the spot to do it. And I used it with no shame because it was distracting. I wanted to carry on with the story, but I couldn't because I had to upgrade my gear. And in order to upgrade my gear, I had to go around the world to pick up the stupid materials needed, which spawned randomly and you couldn't see them in the map. At least when I played, I couldn't see them. I'm not sure if they patched that out and you can actually now see them, but I doubt it. So I'm like, I said, fuck it, I'm just going to download the trainer and do that for me.
Yeah. On that actual note as well, the game I played over Christmas, Ghost Warrior Contracts, basically came out during the lockdown, about a couple of months into it, like the big long one we had. It was £35, and it's a structured single-player game, and it sold out pretty quickly. A lot of people bought it, which was unheard of for a Ghost Warrior game. On Amazon, on eBay, it became very hard to get a hold of. The only reason why I got it, honestly, was because I pre-ordered it. And basically, what you were saying about leveling up, in Ghost Warrior, it's pretty much a strong single-player game, doesn't glitch out as much, now that they updated it. It's got skill development, and you can upgrade your weapons by modifications. That's the upgrade buying the modifications, sorry. And you can buy better rifles. You basically get put in maps, like there's 5 areas, and your target's an objective. It's normally steal something, basically get to an objective, interact with it, or, surprise, surprise, shoot somebody, or sneak in like a ninja and stab them, or go all Call of Duty. You can pretty much do what you want, but the way you buy weapons and skills in that one, it's linked to actually gameplay. It's linked to actual gameplay, but you don't go around finding materials or grinding it. There are challenges in the mission. So, for example, do mission A without being seen, interrogate 3 officers, get 20 headshots. They're quite fun to do. They can be a little bit tedious, and they give you skill points to buy skills with, and the actual main objectives give you an icon, which is gives you an icon that represents the currency, just basically skulls, and that's what allows you to buy the new weapons. And the intel tokens are from collecting items. I mean, you do have to collect like 6 items in the actual game per map, but it's not a grind, and they're marked for you, so it's not really, you don't have to go out your way to find them.
If such systems are implemented right, and you have a very fun gameplay loop, and basically all you're saying is that, right, if you want this, you just need to play the game, then it's fine. But if you're on purposefully having a very tedious game loop, and you're saying, right, if you want this, you need to go through the tedious game loop and grind to get something, and you do it on purpose, because on the side you have time savers, as they're calling it, then fuck you. I'm not going to do it, especially not on a single-player game. I mean, this is the main reason why I stay away from MMOs, because most of them are just pay to win and grind fests.
Yeah. It's almost as if when someone makes a single player game like God of War or Ghost Warrior Contracts, and they take away the pay to win elements, they take away the grind elements, they take away the microtransactions, and they do what they did back to the days of the PlayStation 1 and 2, where they have structured single-player games with optional multiplayer in case of the PlayStation 2 onwards. It's almost as if those games are very popular, but they maybe don't make as much money.
which is why they're remaking them and trying to add microtransactions on them. It's just ridiculous. I mean, I won't forget that when Warcraft 3 Remake came along, they said that, right, if you make a mod using our tools, we own that mod. Because basically what happened is that MOBAs, the very first MOBA was Dota, Defense of the Ancients, which was a map developed in Warcraft 3. And that single map spawned the games such as Heroes of the Storm, Dota, Dota 2, League of Legends, etc., which now, well, Riot Games is one of the most profitable game companies in the world, and the game itself is one of the most played. It's quite high up, along the likes of Counter-Strike, which is way older than League.
It's weird how Rainbow Six is I don't know if Rainbow Six Siege has replaced Counter-Strike, but it's kind of become the next Counter-Strike for a lot of people.
Yeah, and Ubisoft sort of sees that, and they're constantly making changes about microtransactions. I think the very latest one involved adding NFTs or some shit like that.
I think so.
Which,
Yeah. And I think we've hit the time now.
Yeah.
So we hope everyone out there enjoyed this. I hope it brought some people some pleasure to laugh at. Even if you disagreed, it's fun to argue. But we both sincerely wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Jim?
Yeah. Thank you very much for being here. All the best. Stay safe, and hope you have a good time despite on what's happening in the world right now.
Yep. Check out our Slug page, which will provide a link in the description. And remember to like and subscribe. Stay safe, guys.
Till next time. See yas.
See yas.